Welcome to this episode of the Mafia's Greatest Hits with Bill Staxx and Bill Crooks. And we got William Oldfield here. Hemi, what's up, man?
What's up, guys? Great to be on the show.
Hey, it's an honor to be with you every time. You're a wealth of knowledge. I'm going to give you a quick introduction. If people don't know who this is William Hammy Oldfield, and he's probably best known for his book. I'm going to get it up here. One of the longest names in any book history, but it's Inspector Oldfield and the Black Hand Society, and then a bunch of stuff I can't even read because my eyes aren't good enough anymore. But I actually did a podcast on it, Partners in Crime. Well, he did like a 2-part podcast on it, right?
It is good. The most insane podcast you have ever done. It is awesome. It has more screams and explosions in it.
Well, I was kind of going over it today just to kind of refresh myself. It is a good podcast, man. You were fantastic on it. And really, we only covered a tiny sliver of the book when we did it. Like, we didn't by any means cover, all of it and stuff. So you got a lot of cool stuff going on. Are you going to announce it now or are you going to do it later?
Now, let's get it over with. I'm working with writer David Steenhoek and my original co-writer of the book, Victoria Bruce. And we're in development with a TV show that initially right now it's called Oldfield, and it's going to be based off of John Frank Oldfield, the post office inspector character in the book, The Black Hand Society. And the goal is to we put a pilot out there, and it should be coming soon. David Steenhoek, of course, was just announced today as the writer of the Accidental Gangster movie with about Ori Spato's story. And he's also involved in a TV show that's coming out. He's the creator called The Chameleon about Frank Panessa, the first DEA agent ever, who was called The Chameleon. And then, so you'll be probably seeing Accidental Gangster first, Frank Panessa's, The Chameleon, and then you'll be seeing Oldfield coming out. It'll be a little bit like The Untouchables crossed with Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah. So let's go over real quick who Oldfield is, because it's not you.
That is definitely not me. No, that is not me. No, that's a 1911 photograph. He would be what would he be, like 43 years old in that picture? John Frank Oldfield was. That's old. Yeah, he was old back then. Yeah, he was old when old was cool. That John Frank, it was a post office inspector, and at the time, from 1899 to 1911, he was one of the most powerful law enforcement investigators on the planet. And the reason being is the FBI was in its infancy, and the post office had been around since 1775. It was a department under the president at the time. It wasn't like it is today, a private, government company. It was very important because we had treaties with 190 countries around the world, and part of those treaties allowed the inspectors to travel anywhere in the world and go after any criminal they wanted if they had anything to do with communication through the mail of any kind. And of course, around that period of time, you had telegraph, some telephone. You didn't have radio yet. So basically, it was mail for everything, and so they were so powerful that they were, the most powerful law enforcement officers in the world. And when they went after somebody, they had carte blanche. They could spend as much money as they wanted and do anything they wanted.
That was the first federal offense, right? The creation of the federal offense.
Yeah, I would say so. For example, if they had to commandeer a cruise ship or a freighter that was going to England, they could actually take over that ship and say, I need you to reroute me to the Azores, or if they need to take over a train going from Chicago to Denver, they could say, we need to change that. I got to go to St. Louis right now. And the train would actually reroute. They had amazing authority, and to go after basically anyone, that had violated the the mail laws. Today, what they are today is much more sophisticated. They keep very quiet. They're called the silent service.
Yeah.
They're just as powerful as they were then, by the way. But you ask an FBI agent or a U.S. Marshal or a Secret Service agent, and they'll laugh because they think that they're the most powerful. We still have a postal treaty with over 198 countries. So that means that any post office inspector has jurisdiction in 198 countries. And so they can do what
So
basically
what about
do the
like
same
internet?
thing.
Does that fall under the power of the post office?
They would be electronic mail, yeah. And so, for example, if you see any of the milk cartons with sadly a missing child on it, for international child, trafficking, that's them. They go after those people. They captured the Unabomber, for example, and then they handed him over to the FBI. So they like to be called the silent service. They don't like a lot of attention. You notice they're not in the news ever. If they are, it's very, very rare. In fact, when I was working on the book, a number of them were quite reticent about, do you really want to do this? We don't like a lot of, publicity, that kind of thing. But then they kind of jumped on it and they really enjoyed it, and we got involved. And I got some great help from some amazing inspectors, primarily Dan Mihalko, who was head of their congressional affairs and public relations, actually. And he's just an amazing wealth of knowledge, a great guy. And but he's the one that even wrote the first review on the back of the book, joking about how Oldfield was a self-promoter back in the day when post office inspectors were supposed to be under the table, low key, so that got him in trouble with all the other feds.
He was a little guy.
Yeah, he was about my size, about 5'6", somewhere around there, on a good day. And
he would kick your ass.
Funny enough, he looked so meek and mild. He was famous for sweating prisoners and scaring the hell. They were terrified of him when he would take them into interrogation. He took down the district attorney of the city of New York for corruption and actually got in a fist fight with him out in front of City Hall in New York City. Bare knuckles. Took him on because the guy, was trying to stand up to Oldfield, but the guy was so corrupt, and Oldfield took him down. And his brother, who was the postmaster of New York City, Oldfield was sent into as an outside, from that territory, outside that territory, to go in there and clean up the mess in New York. He was famous for so many different types of cases.
And he was
besides
famous for
Black Hand Mafia.
There one where he knocked a guy out, and they were like, there was a big debate on whether or not he used like brass knuckles or something because the punch was so.
That was the headline in the Baltimore Sun was at the top of the page was it blackjack? So basically, a leather blackjack was shot in it, and the guy was much larger than him. His name was Higginbotham, and they were both vying for chairmanship of a political party in Maryland at the time. And Oldfield was actually he was a postal inspector at the same time that he was still involved in politics, and that was not allowed. So eventually he had to be separated from it for ethics reasons. But he was still chairman of the party in Maryland at the time, and so they were fighting for it. So of course the guy called Oldfield a thug, a liar, and a wife beater. And so Oldfield jumped up from the from the seat and knocked the guy out with one blow. And the guy was like over 6 foot and over 200 pounds, and Oldfield was probably not more than 140, soaking wet. But yeah, he was a baller, as they would say today.
And when he was going after these guys, he was getting resistance from the government. They acted like they didn't exist, right?
Well, what happened let's go back to the story of this is one of his many career cases. He did a lot of investigations around the United States and overseas, but he because Ohio was the Great Lakes area. Lots of people don't know that now because it's very depressed in most of the Great Lakes now. But that area of the country was the richest area in the world, not just the U.S., but in the world, because of you had the Carnegies and the Rockefellers and the Fords and the Firestones and just all these wealthy people. So you had millions of Italian immigrants that came to the United States between 1890 and 1910, and you had a lot of the criminals from Italy follow them. In fact, Italy and Sicily opened up their prisons, not unlike the Mariel boat lift with Fidel Castro when he opened up the prisons and dumped them all in the United States. And now that Maduro is doing with Venezuela, emptying all their prisons and dumping them into the United States through the southern border. That's happening now. And so what Italy did was the same thing to save money and get rid of all their bad guys. So tons of them came to the United States, and we'll just cut the story short, for time. They started out mainly coming into South America, Central America, and New Orleans. Actually, the port of New Orleans was one of our most powerful ports of the whole United States because it was a warm water port all year round. So that it was actually the busiest port in the U.S. So they came in through that area and worked their way up the Mississippi River to the Great Lakes, where all that industry was and all that wealth, throughout the country. And in that area, mainly central Ohio and northern Ohio, Oldfield was working out of. He was stationed in Cincinnati, but he was located in Columbus, Ohio, at the federal courthouse and post office, which is before we had federal buildings and whatnot. You had a federal courthouse / post office in every city, U.S. post office. It was like, and that's where the federal guys were put, and all the post office was put, and the judges used to sit there and have all the trials there. So they put him in the one in Columbus, Ohio. It's behind the State House. It's still there today, but now it's a law firm named Bricker and Eckler. They've restored it. It looks just like it did in 1908 when Oldfield was in there. And so Oldfield was paying attention to all these Italians that had come to Ohio, and noticing there was all this crime he's seen in the local papers that he didn't have any jurisdiction over. And he was like, there's something bigger going on here, and the word was out that these very wealthy and successful Italians were getting extorted for huge amounts of money in the day. I mean, today, $10,000 back then would be a little over $1 million today. To give you an idea. And they were getting extorted for $10,000, $20,000. And if they didn't pay, their houses were being blown up. Their children were being kidnapped. Wives were being, unfortunately, attacked in public or raped, that kind of thing. It was some seriously rough stuff. No ethics involved.
Just a minute. Like, there's a perception that all the Italian immigrants and stuff were poor, but not necessarily.
No.
There were some successful. And like you kind of trace the route from South America up. What became of that is a lot of importation and lucrative businesses in the Italian and Sicilian communities.
It was huge. Actually, in Columbus, Ohio, you had Giovanni or John and Collegiero or Charlie Amicon, Amicon. They started out selling peanuts on the railroad to the workers and bringing buckets of water to them and doubling their money, paying a penny for the peanuts and then selling them for 2 pennies, that kind of thing. They ended up being in Columbus, Ohio, becoming the largest importer of bananas and distributor in the entire United States. And the banana kings, they were called. Banana was like an
exotic fruit. So were oranges.
Oh, the banana wars, a lot of people don't realize that that's how the Panama Canal was built. I mean, that's how we took over Panama, because of the banana wars are supporting all the banana companies. Yeah, there you go. Yes, we have no bananas. Actually, the song actually came out at that time, and they were exotic, and these guys were making tons of money. So all these guys that were in the early Sicilian Mafia, was mainly Sicilian, by the way. They did occasionally bring in some other people from Naples and whatnot, from the Camorra, but there wasn't a lot of intermingling. So this group is actually primarily from Trebia, Palermo, the Termini Imerese area. And what they did is they gradually came up in the United States, like we said, through New Orleans. Some of them stayed there. Some went to Baltimore. Some went to New York. Some went to Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Portland, St. Louis. If you guys see it, and the major. Right,
and they came on last. Didn't you say in another show? I heard you say 40% of the wealth in Sicily came to America.
Yeah, during 1890 and 1910, 40% of all the wealth, if you want to, personal wealth. Like if everybody on your street, 40% of the money, if you had put all their money together and it just left within 10 years, what would happen to the neighborhood? It would go to hell. So that's basically what was happening to Italy at the time, because all the money, anybody who had entrepreneurial skills, any money, was coming to the United States and starting businesses here. So don't think everybody was a poor laborer here in the United States coming from Italy. 40% of the entire country's wealth came here. And of course, 200,000 criminals, convicted criminals, followed them, those 2 million people, and preyed upon them. And they created an organization. They were using a term called Black Hand. And that was just a term of fear that went back. Many countries have used it. right now there's the Black Hand Gang cartel in Mexico. They're using the same symbol. It's just used to create fear in superstitious people, and especially in an early immigrant community, you have a lot of superstition and fear of the country you're in. You don't want to talk to the police, right? That kind of thing. You don't speak the language, and so you're an easy victim for your ethnicity's organized crime syndicate. So what the Black Hand did is first they basically franchised around the United States and set themselves up in produce businesses, just small import export produce as a good cover, and then immediately started preying upon the Italian American community. There you go. That's a great La Mano Nera right there. And that's the kind of stuff you'd receive in the mail. And back then, if you received something like that, you'd be terrified, So once they began organizing,
speak English, they couldn't go to the police.
No. And by the way, sadly enough, the police, and this is the bureaucracy that Bill referred to a few minutes ago, that Oldfield was starting to put some pieces together just on his own. This is before he was actually assigned to the case. And he was putting these pieces together. And because Columbus, Ohio, where he was stationed, had a massive Italian-American community. In fact, they have an area there now, it's called Italian Village. That's all these beautiful Victorian homes that are all restored. And that's where Charles Amicon and his brother lived, for example. And it was they were all very wealthy people. And they were getting preyed on for huge sums of money. Their houses were being dynamited. One of the saloons was blown up on 6th Street. Marcino's saloon was just blown to bits. And because he didn't participate in their extortion. So Oldfield finally got the break came when Charles Amicon himself, who was sick and tired of this extortion going on and the police ignoring it, saying that it was just local gangs or thugs around the United States. No way were they organized or contacted or communicated with each other. That's just been going on since the 1890s. And now we're talking, this is like 1907. And it's still that way where the federal law enforcement, city, county, state law enforcement don't think these Italians are organized. They have no respect for them. There's a lot of prejudice against them. They're called mustache Pete's. They're insulted in every way you can think of. If you can look at Salvatore Rizzo.
This is all pre-Joe Masseria.
Yeah. Now behind you have Salvatore. Let's have a little fun here about Mustache Pete's. One of the people in the Black Hand was Salvatore Rizzo. And you look at that mustache of his. Now you see that was in style then, and that's where they got the nickname. On the left, you have Salvatore Arrigo, who was actually the boss. They didn't call it the Godfather back then, but the national boss of the time. And he was retired on March 9th, 1909, and replaced by a gentleman by the name of Franchi Spadero, who was a saloon keeper in Cincinnati, Ohio. That if you can see how they look, they find people who have a small business, that sort of thing, to cover for their massive wealth, and they always have to have a cover business. So anyway, Charles Amicon and he's already been through bombings, threats, and he's standing up to these guys. He's a powerful, hardcore businessman. Let's even say Trumpian. He just stands up to these guys. He just will not take any of their crap. And they've even faced him on the street when they've come in to town from other parts of the country and stood up and talked to him in the street and pointed their finger at him, and said, because they were so bold, they weren't afraid of the police or anything. And he said, he went to the federal building and goes into the post office, says, and actually talks to the main front desk guard and says, I want to see Uncle Sama. No joke. I want to see Uncle Sama. I'm not joking about Italian language or anything. He actually said it, and it's quoted in the papers of the day. And
people thought
so
Uncle
he's
Sam
set up.
Was the government?
He's the first rat in history, right?
Well, no, he's the victim. He's a victim, though. He's not a bad guy. He's a victim. And so he said, I've had it. I'm not, because he said he was going to kill these guys if the police didn't do something, he was going to kill them himself. This guy wasn't afraid of the mafia at all.
I don't know if you know this. They approached him on a porch and were kind of like, I heard you're having trouble, man. That sucks and stuff. And he flat out said, if I had any inkling of proof that you did it, I'd put bullets in your head myself. And they're just like,
right to their face.
Yeah, right to the
And
face.
so,
He was the
so he,
Giuliani of the day, man.
Except Giuliani
well,
kind of
yeah,
hid behind more powerful, tougher people. Yeah.
Yeah.
This guy was.
yeah, that's true. I mean, this guy was actually a victim. I mean, Charles Amicon. So he goes to see Uncle Sam, which is who's the only federal G-man in town in Columbus. My great grandfather, John Frank Oldfield. So he goes up the stairs into the mezzanine level of the building behind the State House, and Oldfield is sitting there at a desk with a smoking a cigar with a magnifying glass, looking at papers, right? And John Amicon is a good head taller than him and another 100 pounds heavier, easily. So he's a giant of a man. So Amicon sees my great grandfather, looks at him like, "Are you kidding me? This guy is going to take on the mob for me? Are you nuts?" You know. So he slaps all these letters down on the desk, and I mean, kind of stands up to Oldfield. You know, he's like, "I'm not afraid of a G-man." You know, he just slaps the stuff on the desk. Oldfield stands up, kind of surprised. You know, and Amicon goes, "Uncle Sam, you have to do something about this. You know, look at this. These people want my money. They want to kill my children. They want to blow up my business." He goes, "They're all over the country. They're everywhere."
He's been dying for somebody like this because every time he investigates, nobody talks.
Yeah, Oldfield's known about this. He knows that these guys are organized. No one believes him. He gets laughed at when he goes to meetings or when he goes to Washington to talk to to an attorney general, that kind of thing. He gets laughed at all the time.
Does he carry a weapon? Does he carry a gun?
Yeah, he carries he carried a 25 or 32 caliber Colt police positive pistol, which I still have to this day. It's a revolver. They carried that's what they carried back then, and carried it in his.
Some guy with balls that'll stand up. He never thought they'd just walk in his door.
Yeah, he couldn't believe it. He's been looking for a witness for years. Now, the funny thing is, like I said, he's been the laughing stock of the Postal Service. He's been famous already for other investigations, but they thought he was just chasing this wild goose, this blue silo, blue sky. Like Oldfield, look, Abraham Holmes was his inspector in charge, who was running from Cincinnati, the big regional part of that office there. And he was like, "Oldfield, drop it. Just drop it. I got all these other cases for you to do. We got coal mine, riots. We've got, murders, whatever, train robberies, post office robberies, that kind of stuff. You got to do all this other stuff.
We got fraudulent stamps, for God's sakes."
Oh yeah, we got a postmaster who took $5 out of the till, and we're investigating him. I mean, I'm not kidding. They have to, by the way, they have to investigate everything. So they have to investigate. This is the scary part about a postal inspector. They have to audit every post office in their region every year. Can you imagine how boring that would be to go in there, audit the books, audit the stamps, audit the safe, and you're like, money orders, all that crap. So when they would get these fun cases, they loved it because they could go out and kick ass,
Yeah, they can actually do.
So half their life was boring as shit.
Explain how the extortion's taking place, though, because he's got.
All right, well, let's just do this. Okay, so Charles Amicon comes in with these letters. Okay, I'll tell you how this works. So the reason I said that John Amicon said, "Uncle Sam," or John Frank, look at all these letters from all over the United States. Okay? They're everywhere. No matter where, I can't leave the country. No matter where I go, they will get me. They will kill me. They will take
a note under the mat. These are coming from Pittsburgh, wherever.
They're coming from Portland, Oregon. They're coming from New York City. They're coming from Sicily. I mean, you can't. It's like, so the concept that the Black Hand created was to create a concept of inevitability, where no matter where you go, you're being watched. And what they would do is they had franchise all around the country, and they were sharing money, true organized crime, sharing the take from all these rich Italians that they were extorting all over the United States. And they would split it evenly, share it. They send it. They'd buy money orders and ship each other their share by their percentage of seniority, that kind of thing. So one guy would get 100, another guy might get 200. Because of seniority, and then their families back in Sicily would get money orders mailed to them, that kind of thing. That's how they split the money. And they would have meetings a couple times a year.
I write a letter to the guy down the street, but I mail it to Pittsburgh, and then Pittsburgh mails it back here.
Right, and that's where the term. Okay, so let's cover the two terms. Blackmail. That's where the term blackmail comes from. Come from the Black Hand, using which is before they were called the Mafia, extorting people for money, and then killing them or blowing them up otherwise. So that was what the blackmail was, or kidnapping a family member or whatever. not extorting them to embarrass them like they do today. Expose that you had an affair or something. And so that's where blackmail comes from. And then the second word is undercover. Now what Bill just talked about was that a cover used to be an envelope. They don't call it a cover anymore. They call it an envelope that you put a letter in. So what you do is you write a letter to your victim. Let's say a guy in Cleveland, Ohio, you want to extort for $10,000, right? You put that in an envelope or a cover. You address it, put a stamp on it, okay, and seal it. Then you get another envelope or cover. You address this to the captain or boss of the Black Hand in Cleveland, who is let's say Buffalo, who is Giuseppe DiCarlo. So you address the envelope to Giuseppe DiCarlo. You put the other letter to the victim in the envelope inside that envelope, and then you seal it and you mail it to Giuseppe DiCarlo in Buffalo. Okay, he then opens it up. And there's a note in there that says, mail this letter at once. Actually, guess what it used to say? Under penalty of death, mail this letter at once. In other words, Giuseppe DiCarlo, he had no choice. He better mail that, or the Black Hand would kill their own brother, because you have to always follow orders on penalty of death within your own organization. Even if he thought he was being investigated, or he still had to do it. So Giuseppe DiCarlo cuts it open. He sees a little note in there that says, under penalty of death, mail this at once. So he sees the envelope and the letter inside that's addressed to the victim in Cleveland, Ohio. He puts the stamp on it, mails it to the victim in Ohio. Or back in Cleveland. So all of a sudden, the victim in Ohio in Cleveland's like, shit, I just got a letter from Buffalo, that says they're going to kill me, that knows all about what I'm doing, what I did last week, because the guys in Ohio were spying on him. So it looks like the guys from Buffalo were spying on him too. Then he gets another letter using that undercover, we think is detective work today, but that's what undercover means. And then he gets another one from Portland, Oregon, another one from New Orleans, another one from Travia, Sicily, that's telling him what he's doing in Cleveland, or what his kids were doing a week ago, that they were shopping with their grandma or whatever, even what color their clothes were. And this guy's like, holy shit, there's no way. They've got eyes everywhere. They've got, and they start looking over their shoulder. They're afraid to go out. And finally, and all of a sudden, just a window gets broken on their house with a rock with a note on it. It was written in blood with a dagger or something on it, and a hand drawn in blood. And they're like, "That's it, fine. I'm getting the $10,000." And the letter says, drive to or take the train to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, or whatever. And on this bridge at this time of night, walk out to the center of the bridge at 9 a.m. or 9 p.m. and there will be a person of honor to meet you there. And if you cannot come yourself, send a friend of your own that you trust to go. If you're afraid to deliver it yourself, you can send one of your friends that you trust to give them the bag of money, and then they go deliver it to the Black Hand. So they never even have it delivered from where the original, gang was. Now, the way the gang was organized, and people had a terrible time believing this when I was first exposing it, was that the headquarters of the mafia in America was in Marion, Ohio, an industrial town in northwestern Ohio. It wasn't in New York.
Me and Hammy are both from. These are our
towns. But a lot of people think that it's down south, right?
Like New Orleans, yeah.
New Orleans,
a lot of it
or
started
the
in New
five families in New York City. So a lot of people associate New Orleans or New York. They don't really associate Ohio. Right.
Well, these guys, by the way, came from New Orleans. I mean, a lot of them. For example, let me back up. Now they had bosses and overseers. They didn't call them capos or capi or capo de tutti capi. They didn't call them godfathers, anything like that. They called them. When they talked about their own, they called it the Brotherhood. All right, they didn't call it La Cosa Nostra, our thing. They called it the Brotherhood, or AEN, the brothers. If you want to use Latin, and then they called their society the Society of the Banana. Because most of them were fruit import export. Not all of them. Some were business people that owned rental properties. Some owned cigar rolling businesses. But the main guys who started it were importing fruit from Brazil and South America into New Orleans. The guys who first started
it. Which was huge because they're just now starting to develop like the benefits of citrus and things like that.
Oh yeah, everybody's realizing for scurvy and everything else. Now the man that started it all, that really got everybody together, right? I mean, they were small. They initially were around the country, and they were not organized. Now in Chicago and New York, yes, they were organized. We already know that. They kind of, were already doing their own thing. But to make it, and in California and San Francisco, but to make it go across the country like they did, you had a guy who was underneath Matranga, Macheca, and Esposito and Provenzano in New Orleans. His name was Antonio Lima, and he was from Termini Imerese area of Palermo, the dockyard area of the shipping area of Palermo. He came over.
Hey, Bill, somebody asked a question
yeah.
real quick. They want to go back to Marion, Ohio. It was the capital of what?
The Mafia. What is the Mafia?
Well, the Black Hand,
by the way,
it wasn't the capital. They kind of headquartered there. Let me finish with Lima, because that's what I'm getting to. So Antonio Lima, after the death of the police chief of, in 1890 of New Orleans, and they were starting to get hot down there. And then the lynching of of the supposed people who were involved in the killing, he decides to go up the Mississippi River and go to Ohio. That, to the great industrial rich state of Ohio. That's how this started. And then he started contacting all these other guys he knew in Pittsburgh, Baltimore, whatever, and starting to bring them together. Well, then his son came to the United States, his son, Salvatore Lima. So Antonio Lima kind of backed off. He was getting older. So he backed off and was really kind of quiet. A lot of people didn't even know he existed anymore. Kind of sat back. So his son, Salvatore Lima, had immigrated and had a nice, very nice, successful fruit contracting business in Marion, Ohio. His brother-in-law, Sebastian Lima, comes in from Trabia, immigrates. Now, guess what? They've got they got a business going. So they get together and they contact with Antonio, their dad, all these other bosses, if you want to call them that, or overseers of major cities. They decide to create the Society of the Banana. They elect Salvatore.
Sorry, Bill, I got to slow you down sometimes. Sebastian, I'm trying to remember the book. He's kind of a scary dude, right?
Yeah. Salvatore Lima is the brains. Okay. Sebastian Lima is one of the guys that just likes to go out, and it's kind of like when you have a boss in a town and they show the son and he's a hothead and he keeps getting in trouble, and the Godfather keeps saying, son, you got to calm down, man. You're going to get in trouble. And then finally, sometime in the movie, he gets killed because he's just wild. Well, Sebastian was kind of like that. Now, we had some other enforcers too, but he liked to go out there and bust heads, and was definitely a hothead. While Salvatore thought of himself as another Rockefeller or a Firestone or a Carnegie. He saw himself growing to become a multi-millionaire, and the most powerful, a billionaire if possible. He said, America, allows me to do anything I want. I can make anything of myself here. And so he wrote a lot of poetry and a lot of philosophy about that. He was very intelligent. So he finally is working with these other mafiosos around the country, and they at the time they have a gentleman by the name of Salvatore Arrigo as the boss, and they called him the boss of the bananas. And he was more of a figurehead. And people like Salvatore Lima did all the controller work, the accounting work, getting the letters written, selecting the victims, identifying the victims around the country, that kind of thing. There you go.
This is him, right? Salvatore Lima?
Yeah, with his haircut, but that's Salvatore Lima when he's older.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll tell you, we'll get to where he went after this. This is early 1900s. So what happens is that on March 9th, 1909, they have a meeting in Marion, Ohio at Salvatore and Sebastian's fruit store. And in my collection, I have all the actual invitation letters to all these bosses around the United States that were seized as evidence back in 1909. And they invite all these different bosses in from around the country. They all come in by train. John Frank Oldfield, my great-grandfather, and other postal inspectors identify with an informer that these guys are coming to town, and they actually stake out the meeting of the mob, where these guys get together and they retire Salvatore Arrigo, the boss of the bananas, at 67 years old, the guy behind your head in that picture, and they elect Frank Spadaro, the new Godfather, or the boss of bananas. And then they elect Salvatore Lima as the overseer, of Cleveland and Cincinnati. All right, that's awesome, guys. I love that. You're
Staxx,
fucking
your
awesome.
preparation is
Staxx,
admirable.
that is
I love it.
freaking awesome. I love it when you do stuff like that,
Love
Staxx.
it.
You kick
Bananas.
my ass. Okay, here we go. Wait a minute. Okay, Salvatore Lima is the second from the left in the top row. That's Salvatore Lima. Sebastian Lima is second from the left in the lower row. Okay. Frank Spadero, the current boss of the Bananas, when this trial happened, is the fourth one on the second row. He's on the right with the square around or the outlining around his face. And the retired Godfather is the second from the right in the top row with the beard and looking all scruffy. That was the retired Godfather or boss of Bananas.
They still charged him when they were.
Yeah, I feel kind of bad for that guy because he was like chilling on his porch.
He's on his way out.
He was
on his way out.
He's on his way out of the organization.
Okay, so
no, come here, man.
I'm going to read you. I'm
like
going to show you a picture if you can see it. I'm actually going to show you a picture. Not a picture, but here is the actual letter on Salvatore Lima's letterhead. Okay, wait a minute. If you can see, Sam Lehman Company, the Banana Kings, right?
Not at all.
Okay, this is the letter. This is a letter that he wrote on May 19th, 1909. Okay, and here's the original onion skin translation from the trial evidence. I'm going to read this to you.
Wow.
This is Salvatore Lima, who is now, after Frank, like I said, Frank Spadero has been now elected Godfather on March 9th, 1909, right? The big meeting where all the feds staked it out, figured out who was who, made their little chart and their pictures like they do in their back office, their investigative office. All these bosses go home around the country, and one of them couldn't come. And this is the guy I told you about before, Giuseppe DiCarlo from Buffalo. He was the boss of Buffalo and Niagara Falls. He couldn't make it to the meeting. So Salvatore has to give him an update on what happened, right? So Salvatore writes here, dearest friend, I advise you that I was in Marion, Ohio, and that we changed the boss of the Bananas, which was the friend Arrigo Salvatore, as he is well advanced in age, and we have made our friend Franchi Giuseppe Spadaro boss of the Brotherhood. And all the friends honored me as overseer of Cleveland and Cincinnati, and this will serve for your guidance. Nothing more. Salute, etc. Salvatore Lima. This is the kind of stuff I have in my collection. These are all the original files, not copies. I mean, I should be touching with my fingers. I should have gloves on, but at least I want to show it to you.
Yeah, the oils from your fingers eat through the paper.
It's written in 1909.
Not many people
and
have this level of stuff from this era, man. It's crazy.
No.
Well, the guys, the postal inspectors that I shown this to, this has been exhibited at the Smithsonian. I've been at the Mob Museum and whatnot. They said they've never seen anything like it because all the stuff gets destroyed or burned or thrown away because they do updates now and then. And they throw away this stuff. So my great grandfather, after the trial, he took all the evidence home. There was no evidence rules back then, so it stayed in our family for what's it been 112 years.
That's
so
wild, man.
And it's a massive collection. Now let me give you a quick idea of here's an actual letter to a victim. Okay, this is a pretty famous one. I use this picture on the back of the cover of the book. All right, this is the actual letter right here. I've got it.
So this is the threat that they made towards the victims?
Yeah, this is the victim is, if you can see there, it says, wait a minute, Gaetano Di Camilli. You see that? And he's on 84th Street in Cleveland, Cleveland, Ohio. All right. Yeah, 84th Street, Cleveland, Ohio. His name is Gaetano Di Camilli. Here's what the letter translation says. And here's the original translation from 1909. It says, Di Camilli, from one of our secret spies, we have learned that you have informed the police contrary to our warning. Therefore, it is time to die, and on the first occasion, you will feel a bullet in your stomach. Coward. You have willed it, and you will die like a dog. The terrible Black Hand. I'd love to get that letter, would you?
Yeah, can you imagine that?
Now, he was a victim, actually. He wasn't part of the Black Hand. He was a victim, and he found, and he told on him, instead of paying. So they basically were like, we're going to kick
a pastor that was giving him some grief. They sent him a letter with human eyeballs glued to the letter. Like,
Yeah.
Gosh, Bill, I was ready for you.
Ah, there it is.
Yeah,
This is the actual. This is a bomb. See the black hand here? Where's my finger?
Yeah,
See the black
right there.
hand right there on the bottom? It says beware from the beware the black hand. It's the Reverend Robbins, and this
Yes,
is was a box. This is a photograph of it. I don't have the real box. And they drew, and they it was a bomb. You can see how it was cut open and diffused by the inspectors. But those are human eyeballs on the front of it that hadn't dried out yet. I'm sure they dried out after this picture was taken.
Yeah,
They were still fresh.
So it was like a box with a bomb in it, and they
Yeah,
put
you can see the box.
Human eyeballs in the skull, dude. They're not.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Wow.
These are not. They're still wet. Right there.
Wow. Do you see that? That's insane.
Absolutely.
They're glued to the. They glued them or fastened them with pins to the top of the cardboard. Then they wrapped paper around it and left it in front of the church, the Lincoln Baptist Church in Cincinnati, Ohio. So I mean, to give you an idea,
obviously with the bomb, right?
Well, it didn't blow him up, obviously, but he was actually doing late night preaching against the Black Hand because he saw the corruption, the gambling, the prostitution, murders, whatnot, and so he would do these Baptist what do you call it?
Like a revival kind of thing.
Yeah, every night at 10 or 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock after the second shift from 3 to 11 from the factories, all the second shift people that didn't have money would go there and get free food, and he'd make them preach to him.
And they liked him. Yeah, he was making waves. Like, it wasn't like some little guy on the corner, man. He was like influencing people. So
yeah, so the Black Hand guys would
like
sit in the church
like this with their arms folded, watching him. And he don't care.
Exactly.
Yeah, like, what do you think you're doing?
Yeah.
Like, this is our town.
And he don't care. He's like a man of God. Like
absolutely.
A legit man of God.
I'll tell you, if people want to read the story, we actually have Vicky and I had a lot of fun doing the research on in the chapter. It's called The Takedown. And what she actually is the one who, I mean, I had all the research, but she actually laid it out and got it down, the timeline down of how Oldfield got this team together. It was like the first Untouchables. He got these guys together that were ruthless post office inspectors. I mean, absolutely ruthless.
That's
And
crazy. Like, how do they pick the people? Like, yo, I saw you open an envelope pretty aggressively. I need you on the team.
I love you, Bill.
Other story.
Yeah.
Bill,
You think of
put
it.
his book link down in your thing because
I did. So the link is in the description of this video.
Can you see that, guys?
Check out his book. You just click on the link; it'll bring you right to his book on
we could
Amazon.
talk for 6 hours, and we're gonna leave a million things out.
Probably. But look at there's the book right there. And Inspector Oldfield and the Black Hand Society. But like I said, this character Oldfield was a bad ass. He might have dressed up and looked all clean and proper, but he was a bad mama jama, man. The guy kicked butt.
Like a serious guy. He looks
smart too.
Yeah, his head looks kind of big, for up to the top there. It looks like a melon, doesn't it? No.
So what ended up happening with these guys? They ended up getting in trouble, right? After this box with the eyeballs.
Okay, so let's move to to him. He worked with John Amicon. He knew he had a witness in John Amicon, right? This super rich, powerful, the biggest fruit importer in the United States, who's going to stand his ground. They got U.S. Marshals, 24-hour protection for this guy. He still kept going, running his company and walking the lunch out in the open every day. I mean, it was crazy.
But evidently, you got this huge shell game going on with the notes and stuff like that. So he's got to beat that.
Absolutely. So what Oldfield does is he brings together this team, and it's really one of the first times where you had a like a task force, if you want to call it that. First, he had to convince the U.S. attorney, like a Rudy Giuliani, which was a guy named William Day up in Toledo. He had to convince, because that was generally the sort of the jurisdiction. Even if it was the whole United States, you had that looked like the bosses were in that part of the country. So he gets William Day to listen to him. He gets his inspector in charge to listen to him. He gets through the bureaucracy. Finally, they start to believe him when he's showing them these letters and all this stuff, and getting some of these families to come forward and give depositions that have had their stores blown up, that kind of stuff. Because some of them were so afraid that they obviously wouldn't testify. Well, Oldfield was known for sweating the witnesses just as bad as sweating the criminals. So he was sweating these victim families and making them more afraid of him than they were of the mafia. And
Like,
so
you're
they
gonna
finally were
testify, I
like,
don't care.
"Oh, I'm not kidding."
He's kind of a
So he
dick.
got
He is kind of a
depositions.
dick, you know.
Do you think
I
he
would
used
say-
dirty tactics back in the day? Do you think he used some dirty tactics to get them?
Of course he did.
Absolutely.
There was no Miranda back then. Are you kidding me? But in fact, they had just changed some of the rules, federal rules, because of post office inspectors beating the crap out of people all the time. So they had finally said that a certain thing about violence, you know, that was when they first started talking about that, where law enforcement had to start putting away the billy club. You had to quit beating people on top of the head to get them to answer, you know, a question. But so there was still some of that going on, and even the newspapers would write about no criminal ever wanted Oldfield to sweat them in the interrogation room. You know,
That's true.
I mean,
But to realize too, like the intimidation with witnesses and stuff, like say a guy doesn't pay, they blow up his porch and then whatever, then they kill him, right? Bill, there's times when one of the guys actually moves in, and now the wife and the daughter, he's the head of the house. One of the black handers is now taking over the estate. Women didn't inherit property back then, right? So a man comes in, and now he's the dad. He's got a 13-year-old daughter he might be banging now.
Oh, so they kill the main head of household, and then they take over the family. Themselves. Replace it with that's crazy.
There was all kinds of dirty stuff going on. Yeah, if your husband, if you were married and you had a nice house and you had your husband had say $100,000 in the bank, which was like $10 million today or whatever. And your husband dies and you're left a widow, right? An attorney is assigned as a guardian over your estate because women did not inherit property. That's why a lot of women immediately got married to the attorney that was assigned, the probate attorney that was assigned to manage their estate. They would bang that guy and then they could spend as much money as they wanted. But anyway,
they're probably going to bang him anyway, but yeah, they get the money too.
But the idea is it's terrible. That's where all the suffrage came from. You know, women's suffrage and everything else, the vote and inheritance, that kind of stuff. Being allowed to get divorced, all that stuff didn't exist back then. It was very weird compared to today.
Get divorced, you had to be married, right?
You could be separated forever. You could live, but you just live at different houses. But you never would get divorced, you know.
And
but anyway,
if your spouse died, you wouldn't even be able to move on, right?
Oh,
well, no, you could move on, but if you're a woman, you had to get a guardian.
Things like that.
Wow, that's
wild. And so especially in the Italian community, I know it's crazy, but the way they kept money in the family in the Black Hand is they would marry in first cousins to each other. You know, like Sebastian Lima was the cousin of Salvatore Lima, but he was also the brother-in-law. You get it? How confusing that is? That's how they kept money and power in the family.
Not anybody in Alabama, but yeah, it's confusing to us.
Yeah, they must have been down there in what's it called before they came up to Ohio, right?
Yeah. All I know is that that's how the money was kept, and the reason I know that is because Sebastian Lima's great granddaughter and I didn't even know each other. We lived about 10 miles apart. We both went to Ohio State together at the same time, and we ran into each other when I wrote this book, and all of a sudden, I met her father, who was the grandson of Sebastian Lima. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to die. He takes me to the Italian club in Canton, Ohio. And I'm meeting all these Goombas, all these retired Goombas. I have no idea who they all are. And they're all like, oh, your great grandfather. He went after my grandfather. And I'm just like, oh, shit, you know. And they're all patting me on the back. And the guys are smoking big fat cigars. They're playing bocce ball in the back, you know. And I'm just like, I'm going to die. I'm dead. I'm going to die, you know. And they're all just being nice to me. You know, they all got their hair combed back like Bill does, you know. They got their bowling shirts. They got their silk bowling shirts on. They're all like 75, 80 years old. They got the real big glasses too. They all got the real big glass frames. I don't get that. The real thick ones, you know, like Henry Kissinger or something, you know. But anyway, so how they busted these guys, let's get back to that. He brings together this task force. He uses postmen, if you can believe it, delivery men, to spy on these, people. He uses clerks. Something's going on here. Yeah, with Bill, with you. Are you still there?
We're still on, man. Let's keep going.
All right. So anyway, so he uses postal.
You have to talk about the stamps, though, right?
I'll be right back.
You're good, man.
You guys just keep going.
Right.
All right. So what they do is they use post office workers and clerks behind the counters. They use postmen that are walking around, carriers delivering, letters all over the place. They use local sheriffs and deputies. They use local police. They also brought together the Pinkerton Detective Agency to help them, very huge, large national private investigative firm. They use U.S. Marshals and Treasury officers, which would be under this Treasury Department, similar to Elliot Ness. He was a Treasury officer. And they brought all these guys together, and they all gave them assignments all over the United States. And they also worked with the editors of the local newspapers, like the New Orleans Picayune, the Chicago Sun-Times, that sort of thing. And the Cincinnati Enquirer. They worked with those editors to give them updates on local news of what was happening and of the related to the Italian crimes. And that was all put together.
It would not happen today. He got them to shut their mouths, and he said, "There's a huge investigation going on. It's going to be a huge story, but I need you to not report it now. And when all things shake out, I will give you everything you need to write your stories."
Bill, that is probably one of the most important pieces that Oldfield was able to do. That I don't know how he did it, but he officially assigned himself without federal government permission, but no one stopped him, as the press correspondent on the case. So in other words, anything that was going to be announced on the case that was going to be reported in the news around the country had to come from him first and be vetted through him first, because he also put fake news out there to get the guys to come out of hiding, like to scare them out of hiding. He'd come up with stuff like, "We've got guys in this city, they're going to be busting into this warehouse on Wednesday night," whatever. Of course, they weren't even there, but the bad guys would then jump out, whatever, and take off, and they'd get caught. So he was using the press, the press, as well as all these local and national law enforcement in this task force. And these editors were amazing. The editor,
reporter, he's like, "You're going to keep your mouth shut till I say."
Right. He actually had meetings with these reporters in every town. Like every town he would travel to in the country, like let's say Pittsburgh, he'd meet with all the top editors and their top reporters and say, "Hey guys, all right, come in here. We all buy them all, whiskeys or whatever in a bar, bring them all together and say, guys, look, I'm going to give you the biggest scoop of your lives if you just keep your mouth shut and let me do this right." Just like Bill said. And he was able to go, and I don't know how he had the charisma to do that, because reporters are never they always want to be the first one to do the scoop, right? Yeah. Somehow he kept it under wraps. San Francisco, all over the United States, and got everybody to agree. I guess he was. Yeah, I guess he was a federal officer
to make it happen.
Yeah, he probably had some. By the way, he probably had something on every single one of those reporters, and something on every single one of the editors.
Before we move forward, you got to talk about the stamps, because that's key, because they're playing this shell game. You got to be able to trace.
All right, so this undercover letter shell game we talked about earlier, with how these letters are put inside of another letter and then mailed off to one guy, who then takes out the victim letter, sends it to the victim in another part of the country. This shell game, as Bill's calling it, where these letters are flying all over the place, and no one knows. No victim knows where they're really coming from and where these gang members really are going to be. They could be anywhere in the country. So they would pay, because they had no idea when someone was going to come up behind them and stab them in the back in any city in the country. So, and now the postal inspectors were also having the same problem. Where the hell are all these letters coming from? That kind of stuff, because they couldn't cut open letters. They already had made some rules about the mail being, sacrosanct. And that's, the same way today. You can't cut open someone's freaking gas bill. If they want to sue you, they can. You can get in a lot of trouble. In fact, today it's 5 years in jail and a $25,000 fine if you decide to prosecute. So it hasn't changed. So they had to work then. No, 5 years. Yeah. Oh, but yeah, 5 years, not 5 days. 5 days, man. That's a DUI. Anyway,
what no. Letter. I opened a letter.
Sorry, man. It's 5 years in jail.
My bad.
No, thank you. No, thank
okay, so what they had to do is, yeah. Well, since they couldn't open the letters, what do you do? How do you track this shit? So they work with the postal clerk standing at the counter. Mr. or Mrs. Postal Clerk, and the bad guy walks in. They're already told by the inspectors and who to look for. The local chief of police, the local sheriff, they're all all in on this together, and everybody's keeping an eye out. When you see like so and so, like this guy I said in Buffalo, Giuseppe DiCarlo, goes to the bank every morning, goes to the post office every morning. The moment he walks in that post office, everybody in there knows that because they're supposed to be watching Giuseppe DiCarlo. He goes to his box, he opens it up, he pulls out a letter from Salvatore Lima, let's say. Okay, you see him cut it open right by his box. He pulls it out. There's an envelope in there already sealed and addressed, ready to go. Aha! No one does that, And he walks over to the counter. What's he do? They didn't. No one had books of stamps at home like they do today, where you could buy stamps and leave and have them on your counter at home or something, or even print them out on your PC if you want it. You had to go to the clerk and buy a stamp, and the clerk would hand stamp your letter. It didn't just get dropped off or whatever. So when you did that, what they did is they were 1 cent and 2 cent stamps back then. They were red. They had a special ink marker. So the clerk had a drawer under the counter where the let's say Giuseppe DiCarlo, the gangster from New York or Buffalo, couldn't see it. The clerk would then, in the O of the word two, TWO, for 2 cents, the clerk would then put a tiny red dot inside the O of the word two on the stamp. Then he'd take the stamp out. He put it on the letter for Giuseppe DiCarlo. He goes, "All right, thank you, Mr. DiCarlo." Stamp it, and drop it in the slot, and that would go out. Well, boom. They'd wait for the victim to get the letter, right? The victim would get the letter with that O on it, and guess what the letter would be from? The letter would be from Salvatore Lima or some other person that they were tracking, or they'd match his handwriting. So they knew exactly, and they created a chain of contact, as people call it, right? What do they call it? A chain of custody. They created a chain of custody to prove that this is where the letter started, this is where it ended, this is where the money then went. You know what I mean? And they were able to create that loop, and that investigation was all over the United States, and everybody was working together on it. What they're able, let's get to the culmination of it, though, right? Keep this down less than freaking 3 hours, all right? Because I'll talk until Bill Staxx falls asleep.
We're only 1%
we don't want
into
that.
the story, though. We're only 1%.
I know.
Basically.
Man, I'll tell you, if I could swear right now, I would.
We can chop this up, man. Okay.
Okay, so let's chop this up. What happens is obviously they figure out who these guys are. They bust into Salvatore Lima's place. It's guns a-blazing, people jumping out windows, the whole bit. There's a lot of great excitement. There's a bunch of stuff. They bust into his safe. His wife is screaming with the babies, and his sister-in-law is screaming with the babies, trying to create a distraction. They get the sledgehammers out. They're busting up the walls. Gold coin comes piling out by the thousands of gold coins, 1 ounce gold coins. I mean, just thousands of them coming out of the walls.
They're insulating this
and
house
they bust
with
up.
cash.
I mean, it's completely filled with cash. You're going to love this.
Wow.
They only take they find the logbook of all the victims and how much was, that was extorted, from each one of them all over the United States. Then they find the Constitution or the bylaws of the mafia. And in other words, they're actual bylaws. And actually, there's 17 articles, just like the U.S. Constitution. Very interesting. They copied it, basically. It's 17 articles. And they also find all the membership, the logbook of all the bosses and all the members around the country. Wow. They grab all that shit and they leave all the money. You know why?
Leave the money, Staxx.
Why? I'll tell you why.
It looked bad if they took it.
They look bad, but not only that, women and children, orphans, didn't inherit the money if the husband was taken away and that money was seized. The widows, or they got killed, or they got put in jail for life or death sentence, they didn't get the money. And these post office guys knew that. They had some honor. So they didn't want to look like bad guys. They let them keep all the money.
What do you think happened with all the money? They just...
The women took it.
Yeah.
Every single one of those families, why we had to keep the story quiet for 110 years, they were living all around me in these huge mansions, and they were mayors and senators and CEOs of big, huge companies and whatnot, because they loaned all that money tax-free and invested it, sent all their kids to college and built all these big corporations and stuff.
And it worked
we had
out
to
for
keep
the best.
zip.
Max. The descendants of these people are like senators, they're doctors, they're executives, and they're
By the
good
way,
people.
the lady that I told you I ran into during the writing of the book, who was the great-granddaughter of Sebastian Lima, and her dad Salvatore, actually the last name is Butera. Don't worry about that. It's just a married thing. He was this massive developer up in Akron and Canton and Cleveland. Massive, built shopping malls and all kinds of stuff, like DeBartolo. Huge. I wonder where all the money came from. Anyway, and then she and her daughter, you're gonna love this. She was a well-known veterinarian, extremely successful. Her daughter was a huge, her daughter doesn't like us talking about this, so I won't get into it, but a very powerful, major U.S. corporate attorney for a giant U.S. corporation. Extremely. Her brother, if you can believe it, helped develop vaccines and whatnot, for some of the most, like Ebola, that sort of thing. He's the kind of stuff he's been doing is major research. So it shows you they don't all get made every generation. So that money was laundered and laundered, and they all and they were taught to be educated and to get away from the mob. A lot of like Meyer Lansky's family. The son, he wasn't involved in the mob. He went to West Point and became a Fed and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of these people send their second and third generation away, and don't get them made again.
Right.
And that's
it's
exactly what a lot of these.
Like even any mobster to want their kid to be in it, but these people had a vision, and
unless you're in New York City,
them doing was sweeping horse shit the rest of their lives for generations.
So that's what happened to a lot of these people. Right. Well, there's this giant. Okay, so there's this 1910 giant federal case. 16 of them are rounded up in this great freaking. The roundup is awesome. It's like a dragnet all around the country. They're knocking doors down at 3 a.m, grabbing these guys. Yeah, there's some pictures of these wonderful men.
Hey, that's Robert De Niro.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, there's some great pictures there too. That's awesome. Yeah. I can't recognize a couple of them. I'm trying to. It's a little hard. They were a little smaller. These are other cases around the country. Yeah, from other gangs that were loosely affiliated, or they at least received money. Shared money. This is a weapons board that they used at the trial. Some of the seized weapons. I have some of those still to this day. Most of them, unfortunately, were buried by my great grandmother to keep them away from her sons, so they would get hurt. So anyway, so these guys get rounded up. There's 14 of them are kept in confinement. 2 of them get away, including the old man, Antonio Lima, who came up originally from New Orleans. He makes it back to Sicily and gets the heck out of town, bringing millions of dollars with him. Never come back to the United States again. Never caught again. And his son and his son-in-law both end up going to Fort Leavenworth. Literally hard labor, breaking rocks in the hot sun in Kansas.
Big rocks, little rocks.
You got it. Big ones into little ones, and the next guy next to you makes the little one into a littler one, Anyway, Sebastian goes crazy. And the doctor decides, and the warden decide to let him go home. So he goes back home and ends up near Canton, Ohio, near Akron. And he dies very soon afterward, but at least he had a couple daughters or whatever, and they end up are the ones I told you. Their descendants are the ones I know. So now Salvatore Lima is a different story.
Yeah, let's get into
this. Is something else. First, let's cover the judge. The judge dies of poisoning. He goes into apoplectic seizures at a dinner after some months after the trial, where his servants were Italian and they had served bananas at the table after dinner. He eats the bananas.
That's
just
weird.
like that. It happened just like that. Just like that. See, it was even peeled like that. No. And so he dies. So basically they poisoned him. They got him. They took care of him. And that's him when he's older. So what he does, he goes to Leavenworth. He does, I can't remember how many years at this point. With Salvatore Rigo, the old man, they're all there. They probably all hung out together there and broke rocks together. Some went to Sing Sing, by the way, in New York as well, and were kept there. And so what happens, Salvatore finally serves his term. He gets parole. His nephew, here we go again, Antonio Lima, sorry, same name, that confuses everybody. they always use Antonio and Salvatore and all that kind of crap. So anyway, so Salvatore Lima, who was the overseer of Cincinnati and Cleveland, who was really the true ringleader, but not the boss, but that did all the real heavy organizing and the heavy lifting to make all the money for everybody. He goes to Leavenworth. He gets paroled. His nephew from Portland, Oregon, picks him up, takes him to Portland, Oregon. Okay, so he hangs out there for a while and does their Black Hand, some low-level stuff up in Portland. Then they move down to San Francisco. Guess what happens? Antonio Lima takes over the Frank Lanza mob of San Francisco, and Salvatore Lima becomes the godfather of San Francisco. So in other words, my great-grandfather thought he got rid of him and sent him to Leavenworth. The guy gets out of Leavenworth and becomes the godfather of San Francisco with pecan farms and oil and olive oil, plantations, and even struck oil in the 1910, actually the later in the California oil boom that came later, and makes all this money off of that. My great-grandmother dies in 1916 at a very young age. Salvatore Lima lives all the way to the late 1960s.
Yeah, I got a
in
picture
San
of him.
Francisco.
Yeah,
yeah, that picture was him, the old man.
Here's
okay,
another one.
that's all.
This might be his.
That's
son.
him right there. Yeah,
is that him?
That's the Salvatore Lima that my great-grandfather put in prison. Yeah,
wow,
that's him as an older
crazy,
guy
dude.
in the night.
Crazy.
Can you believe that?
Like
Now,
1950s.
I have a picture of him from the street. Right, watch this. Look at the two pictures compared. Look, like to the times,
Yeah. Oh,
Here's
yeah.
him. Long time ago.
Well, yeah. By the way, that was a stakeout of the store of postal inspectors. That picture. I'm the only one with that picture. That's my picture.
Actually, I have that picture too, because you gave it to me.
Yeah, I published that years ago.
What happened here was they were surveilling him, and he noticed it, and he brought everybody out and turned it into a family picture, and even brought the mules.
I'm not kidding.
Wow, man. Yo,
they were
surveilling us. We're taking a picture. Come on, get
Salvatore
everybody.
Lima. Yeah, Salvatore Lima's on the left with the big mustache. Okay.
That's Sebastian.
And
the
guy
right,
next that's holding. Sebastian is holding the baby, and he's holding on to the mules. That's Sebastian. And then you got Antonia and Maria there, and the kids. But
Sebastian doesn't
that's
look
in
like
Marion,
he's enjoying
Ohio.
it as much as everyone else.
Can you
That's
believe
on South Main Street in Marion, Ohio, by the way, that picture. And that was in
Can you believe
1909.
he made it that far? Like all this
He was a
stuff
survivor,
he
man.
gained? Crazy, man.
Well,
Crazy.
he certainly outlived the man who put him in Leavenworth by a good 50 years. 50 years.
That's wild.
That's crazy,
I gotta
isn't
give
it?
it to Staxx too. Hammy, I told Staxx that we were going to do the Black Hand and that you were a guest within hours of the show. But he's got all this.
Staxx, I don't know where. By the way, a lot of these pictures,
Wait,
I'm the
you've been
first one to
doing
ever
this for
publish
weeks.
them, and but they're all over the internet. It's so cool that you found them because I've never
He
put
did it
watermarks on
literally
them.
within a couple hours.
I'll tell you right now, Bill. You guys, you tease me about the fact I can barely even use a telephone, let alone use a computer. I'm looking at Bill Staxx. Bill Staxx is so humble. He was like, I'm this guy, man. I've been sober for 3 years, and I got in trouble with gangs when I was younger and all that kind of stuff, and I'm trying to straighten everything out. I'm like, screw that, Staxx. You're sophisticated as all hell, man. You know exactly what you're doing. You're kicking ass, man. You're a lot of fun too.
To the choir here,
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. They said you're.
And now you guys are now it's Bill and Bill together, man. What's that?
3 Bills, man. They said you guys are Jeff Nadeau on steroids.
Jeff Nadeau.
Jeff Nadeau's like a mob. Just kind of like us. How we research the mob and stuff like that.
Some people call it true crime, or I call it paleo mafia. Because this is the old stuff before 1919, right? That's when Prohibition happened. I know all kinds of stuff from the Roman Empire, how they were treated as slaves back then, all the way up to 1919. Anything after that, I can't help you. You got to talk to Bill Crooks about that kind of stuff. People.
Yeah, next time we're gonna get into the
Yeah, we're gonna ascend.
we're gonna get into Murder Inc. and all that stuff.
Oh, you should get into the Youngstown, Ohio stuff when the Pittsburgh mob was pushing up through Youngstown into Cleveland, right, and trying to take over when they blew up Danny Green and all that kind of stuff. You know?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Danny
we were
Green.
talking about that today.
Hang
Matter
with
of
us,
fact,
because that's where my people.
Oh, I
are
got to
from,
tell you,
Youngstown,
Bill
Ohio.
Crooks.
That's
yeah,
my
I got
family.
yeah. Tell him about what we were talking about today about
okay.
Danny Green.
I'm in
man.
1977. I'm in ninth grade, right? You know, I living up in Akron, Ohio, going to Firestone High School. I know a few people. You know, I mean, I'm just a preppy high school kid, but I still knew a few people. And you know, Danny Green's all over the news. I think in 1977, I think there were over 50 bombings, car bombings in Cleveland that year.
Yeah.
It was the car bombing capital of the world, man. It was worse than Mogadishu, man. And you know, or Johannesburg, you know. And you're gonna love this. East side of Cleveland is where a real nice suburb, Pepper Pike, Beechwood area. That's where Danny Green was nailed, where they killed him. Near where actually Corky and Lenny's Deli, not far from there. So, anyways, so a lot of people don't talk about it in all these movies and books about Danny. Well, I heard through the grapevine back then that how they got him was he went to the dentist there in the office building next door, you know, up from the parking lot there, and near Corky and Lenny's Deli there, and he went in to get 2 root canals. So what they did is they waited for the sun. In 1977, they give you some Novocaine, whatever, but 2 root canals in 1977 hurt like hell compared to today. I guarantee you. Today, it's probably painless. Back then, it was probably agony. They had to strap you down to the chair. So they waited for Danny Green to get 2 root canals. Then he's dying. He's probably in so much agony, so much pain. And they're laughing at him from outside the parking lot, you know, waiting. They wait for him to come outside and go sit in his car, and then, you know, and he's probably half asleep from the Novocaine and the laughing gas. His cheeks probably look like Santa Claus or like a chipmunk. And then they freaking push the button and blow up the car next to him and blow him to hell. You know,
I'm thinking they're probably sitting there,
well,
right? Watching him get there. They're
Smart.
like, no.
He's going to look for the bomb.
They're like,
he's going to look for the bomb.
They're like, wait till after he gets the root canal.
Yeah, wait. Exactly. I love how you're waving your hand. No, don't push the button. Wait till after he gets the root canals. You know, where he's hurt like shit. You know,
but that's how sharp Danny Green was, though. They don't normally. They just put a bomb in your car. They put a bomb in the car next to him because he's going to get in. He's going to look around. He's like, yeah, it's good. And then they explode the car right next to him.
Well, you have to understand, Danny Green actually, I can't verify it or confirm it, but from what I heard from guys that I know from up there, from growing up, that he bombed. There was a number of cars got blown up that he was involved in getting them blown up. So, you know, and that's probably why they used the car bomb to get him, because they went after him more than once, you know.
Yeah,
but I think that they finally did.
He was a killer.
Yeah, but I think they finally decided we're going to take him out.
Because he's on video. He's on the news going like, they tried to kill him. It didn't work. And he's like, hey, I live right here. And he's pointing to his house. If you want to kill me, come on.
Yeah, he lived in a little trailer. He lived in a little trailer.
He's like a little mobile home kind of thing.
Yeah, but I mean, he was like on.
Come get me.
He would be on like Channel 8 WJKW in Cleveland, you know, or talking like that, or, you know, these different channels. And you're like, you know, I'm in high school watching Channel 3 or Channel 8, Channel 5 in Cleveland, like, whoa, this guy is so cool, you know, whatever, you know, he's got guts. And he's sitting there right to the reporter, right to the police, you know. And that was then the nightly news. The 70s were really something else. You know, that's one reason why our family kept our mouth shut about this case, because they lived all around us. But most of the old men had died. I mean, Salvatore Lima was in California. You know, he wasn't in northern Ohio where I was living. Sure, but a number of these guys were still alive. They were like in their 80s and stuff.
Did he have reach?
Well, these guys were. Yeah, but he didn't care any, you know, at that point. And obviously, he didn't want revenge because Oldfield was dead. He didn't go after my grandfather. He didn't go after. He had 4 sons. John Frank. He didn't go after any of his sons. So it's obvious that, you know, if you just kept your mouth shut, which is what we had to do, which you can tell I have a terrible time doing.
But now it's a different time now, and people love that people talk, and that's why we're able to bring you to the audiences, man.
Isn't Hammy just like a brilliant legacy of Frank Oldfield? Like, Hammy, you're so brilliant and so smart. You have such a recall. And I got to tell you guys, I'm personal friends with Hammy, like outside of YouTube. I call him for way more than Black Hand knowledge, political knowledge, anything, man. If I am stumped or if I really don't understand what's going on, I call Hammy. You know, he's brilliant. The mind you have is humbling to me.
Thanks very much. I do a lot of research. It's kind of a hobby of mine.
And
I don't get out as much as I should.
Old, I forget things, but man, you're like a steel trap of knowledge.
He's like a walking encyclopedia.
He is. He doesn't forget.
I've been called that before. That's not fair. Don't call me a walking dictionary, walking encyclopedia. I'll punch you, man. I'll punch you for that.
You gave me a lot of knowledge that I haven't ever heard before. A lot of things, you know.
Yeah, he's great. Really, and that's like if you ever talk to Bernstein, he doesn't forget anything.
Yeah.
You know, and
I got to meet Scott Bernstein one of these days. I have to meet him one of these days. I really do. Yeah. He's going to be working with Frank Panessa on Frank Panessa's book. I told you that Frank Panessa was the first DEA agent, #1. He's from my area, from Annapolis, Maryland, and they called him the chameleon. He had a theater degree, and he infiltrated so many cartels and whatnot as in disguise and everything else. And the same writer that's working with me, David Steenhook, on the Oldfield TV show, the cross between the Untouchables and Sherlock Holmes, you know, with those idiosyncrasies and whatnot. David Steenhook is working with Frank Panessa and to put together a TV show called The Chameleon. Scott Bernstein is going to be working with Frank. At least I'm hoping. I don't think it's been signed yet, but I'm sure it's going to happen. Where Scott and Frank are going to write Frank's story. And that's going to be a TV show coming up. In fact, faster than Oldfield's going to be developed, because Ori Spato's got The Accidental Gangster with David Steenhook writing it. It was just announced today in Hollywood in a number of publications. And
shout out to Ori.
George,
go get Ori's book too, if you guys don't know The Accidental.
People got to get The Accidental Gangster.
Ori's book. Yeah,
he's awesome. Ori Spato is an amazing man. I've not met his son Anthony, but his son Anthony is a wonderful guy. He's involved with it too, you know, writing and producing it with David Steenhook. And they're going to have George Gallo and Nick Vallelonga. George Gallo is going to direct. Nick Vallelonga is the guy who was the producer for the Green Book that won Best Picture. I mean, that's the kind of level producer they've got. And Ori's going to, you know, working with him, producing it as well. But my writer, David Steenhook, that I'm writing with him, co-writing him, my former co-author from the book, Victoria Bruce, we're putting together Oldfield. And Ori Spato put us together, by the way, with David Steenhook. I mean, He's amazing. He's a great guy for doing that. He just puts people together, man. I know
Ori Spato personally. I've met him, and great guy. You know what I mean? If you call Ori,
but I mean, it's amazing how Scott Bernstein.
He's a type A to the max. You know what I mean?
Oh, he definitely. But I mean, he put together, you know, Scott Bernstein and David Steenhook and Frank Panessa. They're going to be writing, so that's another TV show. You know what I mean? And then Larry Mazza. If you probably heard of him. I think you know who he is.
Mazza.
He's going to be. I'm teasing you guys. Come on.
This show, that show.
He's going to be working with David Steenhook as well to write his story and into a movie.
Have you read The Life?
Not yet. See, because I actually I won't read it. I won't read it till I get an autographed copy.
Yeah.
What's that?
I got an autographed copy. Shout out to Larry Mazza and The Life.
No, I want an autographed copy. Bill, I won't read it till I get an autographed copy from Larry.
I do the same thing. I've got mine.
I'm going to have to call up David. I can't reach Larry. If you guys can talk to Larry for me, where is Larry? Does he ever listen to the show? Or, I mean, tell him I want a book. I want a copy. I'll send him one of mine.
You want a signed copy from Mazza?
Yeah.
I'll get you that. Yeah,
we got the same name. I'll sell you mine.
The three bills, man, wheeling and dealing on the radio, on television and the radio together. We're streaming live. The three. Look at that. Look at that. It says William, and Bill. Oh man, you ruined it, Bill. That could cause quite a bit of confusion.
Yeah.
No.
I don't ever go by William
down
here.
Bill.
But listen, man, I appreciate you guys taking the time coming on my show. I definitely want to have you guys on again. It's been a great time going over some of this stuff, and thank you guys.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, Billy. Thank you.
You guys are amazing. I'll tell you. Now wait a minute. You Staxx and Crooks are going to be doing this how often?
I
As
don't
much
know.
as we can.
Much as we can.
I hope so. I hope so. You guys are
Hopefully
amazing together.
Get some stuff
No,
done.
you guys are so good at collaborating together. It's amazing. Your personalities
I've
and your
actually
style.
known Staxx ever since I've been doing this.
Yeah, like right when I first started.
Day one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Well, if you guys ever have any questions, you ever want me on again, I might even get a real fake background like you guys have, instead of
Yeah,
the
I'll
real,
hook you up,
instead,
man.
instead of my
We're
actual
gonna set you
apartment.
up, man.
This is the real deal, man. I painted this. This isn't green screen.
Yeah,
I painted it just for the show, man.
Staxx is like,
yeah. See that? Look at that. You see back there? That's my Indians Indians memorabilia on the wall.
That's awesome.
What is this over here? So if I get this right. Wait a minute. How about this? That's my actual antique stereo and all my records framed on the wall there. Look at that. Isn't that cool? I've got all my antique stereo and turntable there. You know. Yeah. See,
And
obviously that wasn't a green screen.
the link.
You liars, man! You green screen fakers.
Yeah, it's a green screen.
you know, the underage Asian hooker just dove for cover when you did the pan. We know
Yeah,
how you roll.
yeah.
Now,
Go
Bill,
get his
no,
book. The link
Bill,
is
she
in the
moved out back in
description.
2017, man.
His book. Go get his book. The link is in the description of this video. Click on the link. It'll bring you right to Amazon. Go check
Get
it
it.
out. Thank you, guys. You want to give anyone a shout out before we go, man?
I just want to say thank you to all you guys, and thanks to Ori and David Steenhook for bringing all of this together. For I want to announce it here tonight that the Oldfield TV show is in development. So thanks so much for you guys having me on. I really appreciate it. Anytime, I'll be back.
Definitely.
Hey, we'll take you back anytime, man. You're a wealth of knowledge.
All right, man.
Thanks, man.
Thank you, guys, and we'll see you guys again next time.
Peace.